How this book was written. All of the events described in this book are drawn from evidence supplied by eyewitnesses and participants. By far the largest part of that evidence was created by the legal process, starting with the police investigations into the 3 murders and ending 8 years later with the disposition of the final appeal. Between these 2 brackets are over 100 reports by local and state police and the FBI, plus verbatim transcripts of dozens of interrogations of witnesses and suspects, testimony at 2 murder trials, and the documentation of 8 years of appeals. Collectively, this written record comprises more than 6,000 pages. The truth behind a great crime, however, inevitably lies deeper than the facts contained in any public record. For the prospective relevance and telling details that must be combined in order for the events to come back to life, I interviewed many of the participants. Most notably, these included Detectives Alan Sylvia, Tom Joachim, and Paul Carey of the Fall River Police Department Major Crimes Division, Paul Fitzgerald and Dan Lowney of Bristol County CPAC, Dr. Douglas Ublacher of the National Museum of Natural History, Alan Robillard of the FBI Rhode Island Medical Examiner Dr. William Sterner, George Dean, Assistant District Attorney David Waxler, Defense Attorney John Berkness, Carl Drew, and the former Carol Fletcher. One witness spoke with me long enough to say she had never told a lie. A week later, her attorney told me she had decided against a lengthier interview. The dialogue in this book comes from 2 sources. The more obvious of the 2 is the verbatim record of the events themselves, where such records were made. Stenographic transcripts of the interrogation by the police and various attorneys, hearings and depositions, testimony at trial, except for the need to edit for brevity, where I have offered conversations for which no verbatim record exists. I have relied on the memories of those who heard them and on official written reports filed by police officers who were involved in the conversations, supported by many of my own inferences from the tone and speech pattern, as I was able to determine them from my interviews and verbatim records. If everyone's versions of these facts agreed, there would be no need for a trial. In resolving disparities for the purpose of telling the story as accurately and fairly as possible, I have relied first on the findings of the court, then on the record, and finally on my own best judgment of what the witness told me 10 years after the events took place. Where a witness repeatedly revised testimony as the case unfolded, in one notable instance, apparently without once telling a lie, I have had to rely on the collective opinion of the police, the prosecutors, and the expert witnesses in selecting the most plausible version from among those attested to. I would also like to thank Detective Kenneth Martin on the Bristol County CPAC, Marcel Gontru and Mark Santos of Bristol Superior Court, Diodato Arruda of the Massachusetts Department of Corrections, Steve Marquardt and Chet Blythe of the FBI, Special Agent Paul Brown of the Narcotics Task Force, Margaret Charig, James Ragsdale, Maurice Lauzon, and Marguerite Hebetch of the New Bedford Standard Times, David Gray on the Providence Journal-Bulletin, Dr. Robert Corey of the St. Anne's Hospital, James Lyons and Robert Murray, formerly of St. Anne's, Jean Gobbin of Taunton Superior Court, and Jim Martin of the Bristol County DA's Office. Henry Scammell. See, I have set before you this day life and good, and death and evil. You can't believe in God without believing in the devil. They go together. Convicted murderer Carl Drew.